Hi, good morning. I'd like to welcome everybody to the special workshop for the Board of Selectmen. For the record, it's Thursday, January 5th, 2017. By my watch, it's 8:31. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to ask Selectman Havitt to lead us, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Charles. This is a discussion regarding the construction of the Shoreline Greenway trails from Madison Town Line to the intersection of Route 146. Just a couple of housekeeping details. This is a workshop, and under the workshop rules for the Board of Selectmen, no action is to be taken by the Board of Selectmen, and there's no public comment unless elicited by the Board of Selectmen. So we'll start our discussion with the members of the board. Okay, I open the floor to discussion by the board members. Who would like to start?
Would you want to just say the amount of emails and letters and stuff? I mean, this obviously is the most controversial thing we've had.
Carl asked me to just remind everyone the amount of correspondence that we have received. I'll start off with the public hearing that we had on November 1st in this very room. We had, by my recollection, and the clerk can correct me on this, we had 57 speakers comment on the design that was presented by the town engineer, Jim Portley, that night. Along with the 57 speakers at the town, at the public hearing, we had over 200 emails and letters sent to the selectman's office. On top of that, we had at least 100 or so cards sent in that were solicited by the Shoreline Greenway Trail organization. I don't know if you can hear me with the chairs rattling back there, but okay. Right, is that it, Carl? You want to say any more? Okay. Trace, am I correct on that? Right, thank you. Okay, we'll start on the design. Does anybody want to start? Charles?
I simply have a question.
Here's another one.
During the public hearing, a number of questions came up about potential changes in any of that type of thing. Has any modifications been made to the original plan? Maybe Mr. Portley, any input on that?
No. There have been no additional designs. I think for the sake of the public information, I will start and say that I have met privately with representatives of Shoreline Greenway Trails, and I think like you have and Ms. Cartier has, I have also met with the opposition, if I can call them that, representatives of people who are opposed to the plan, more than one occasion. I have formed an opinion that I think the design that was presented is probably, in my opinion, not probably, but is not the right design. I'll start off by saying that. Okay.
Yes, there's no question that all of us have received a number of emails and had conversations with both sides of this discussion, and that's why I just want to, for the public, outline procedurally, how do we go forward? I mean, today we're going to discuss our decision-making process, but, you know, is this plan open to modification, or do we simply decide for or against this plan and potentially move on with a separate plan? What are the mechanics of this process?
Okay. If you're asking my opinion, I would recommend to the board in a regular selectmen's meeting, and if the board would want me to put this on the agenda, I would recommend that this plan be voted on, and I would vote against it. And then I would also recommend that the town elicit the services of a consulting group or private engineer and look at a different alternative.
What happens in that scenario with the dollars as they exist in this plan?
The dollars stay where they are right now.
And they potentially might be available for an alternative plan?
Right now, yes.
So I guess the question for me when this all started was, and I've been serving in town for 18 years, and this probably, even more so than the high school, maybe Joe, I think you would agree with me, has been like the most comments and communication that we've gotten from the public on anything. At least I have. And that included my planning and zoning days and my Board of Ed days. So it led me to understand why are people so fired up about this negatively? Like, what is the issue that has people so engaged? And so I, read all the letters and communicated with people. And I think part of it is no intention or malice or anything on the Shoreline Greenway Trail, because I will tell you, in concept, I support the Greenway Trail, and I'd love to see something going on through town, because we made this commitment a number of years ago. And I come from Hamden, where we have the Farmington Canal, and it's a wonderful project, and people use it, and it's a great concept. But I think for whatever reason happened over the years, the communication between the folks on the trail versus the folks in the community, there's been concerns about communication. For me, when I heard that some of the property owners, particularly the business owners, because I'm, most of you know, I'm very supportive of our business community, that were saying, this is not really going to work for us as it's laid out now, and we didn't see this originally. Now, I can't say whether that's true or not true, but they're coming to us saying, listen, at this point, there's a different plan that we thought was going to be in place. So that raised some concerns for me, because those are the people that are particularly going to be impacted by this trail. A meeting with folks from the Shoreline Greenway Trail, Charlie and I spoke to them, and one of the questions I had was, could an alternative plan be done? And I think there's still a question as far as the grant money, and that's what I don't understand, Joe, what happens to the money. And yes, I can agree with the argument that, it's still money and we're spending money, and I get all of that. And by no means am I saying we should spend money foolishly, regardless of where it's coming from. But to try to understand that component, I think, is important in this whole concept. Most of the people that I've talked to that are opposing this, and I probably have spoken to over 30 people that have opposed it, have said the concept of having some kind of connection between green to green is something that they would be potentially in favor of. But as it's, the two concerns they have is, one, the size and the way that the plan is, I guess, for lack of a better way to describe it, and the concern about what happens next. So I think that's sort of a couple things that I'm seeing that keep rising to the top as far as the concerns people have. I do believe the Greenway Trails responded to that by saying, look, of course the plan was originally to have a trail that goes from East Haven all the way to Madison. That is the plan. Where it's going to be, we don't know. We have an idea of where we would have wanted it, but obviously we can't do anything without property owners agreeing to it and support and the town approving it. So the answer is no, we don't have necessarily a plan where it's gonna go next. But at the same time, I don't know if that necessarily would prohibit us from connecting green to green, because that concept could be a really beautiful thing for the town, just something I know that many of the folks that, again, that have opposed it said they would use. But I think the question is, what does it look like? How is it done? And most importantly to me is, how does it permeate the properties of the owners that have already expressed some concern about what that's going to do to their properties? So that's a concern I have. So I don't know if any of those answers can be gotten, Joe. That's what I'm looking for, the grant money and what an alternative plan would look like and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay. What I can answer for you and the board and for the citizens who are concerned about this issue is, let's start with the grant money. There are three pieces that make up this grant. First of all, there's a federal highway earmark, which is the amount of $484,000. That is granted to the town of Guilford, and only to the town of Guilford. That was derived by an agreement with the town of that was a three-way split between town of East Haven, Brantford, and Guilford back in, I think it was 2010. It was even split. So that's federal money that goes directly to the town. So regardless of what happens, we don't lose that money. Okay. Then to receive that money, the town of Guilford has to put up a 20% match, and that is $121,000. Now, since this was in concert with the Shoreline Greenway Trail, the Shoreline Greenway Trail Association was going to put up the match for the town of Guilford, $121,000. They were going to put up the match by getting a grant. They applied for a grant and did get a grant through DEEP and administered through the Department of Transportation of $121,000. So if you take the 484, now you add the 121, that's the 20% match. And then there's a third piece to the funding. It's called the Recreational Trails Grant, which is a DEEP grant, and that is all Shoreline Greenway Trails money. It's $270,000. That's a total now of $875,000, which I gave you all that the other day. So what is the town of Guilford's and what is the Greenway Trails? 484 is totally the town of Guilford's. The 121 is the Shoreline Greenway Trails, and the 270 at this point is totally the Shoreline Greenway Trails. Now, the Shoreline Greenway Trails can assign that over to the town of Guilford by a simple letter of agreement or in form of a contract. Can reassign that 270 to the town of Guilford.
Yep.
Okay? Okay. Is everybody on the board clear of that? Okay. I know Gary and I had a discussion yesterday about that. Okay. So if we were to go ahead on our own, meaning just the town, we would be guaranteed at this point, now things change. As you know, you probably heard that the state just pulled $171,000 under the rug from under the town in our own funding this year for education. So, but right now, we have $184,000 that we can devote to a project of this kind. And to that point, what I would like to see is, I'll take the liberty to talk about that right now, is, yeah, eventually a green to green would be fantastic. And I heard people talk about a trail to nowhere, and I tend to agree with them. The 7/10 just kind of ends at the water tower. But I think we can use this money, and I've in talking to the engineering department, particularly with Jim Portley, is if we can build a project that would go from the Madison Town Line, Guilford-Madison Town Line, to our own town green, a walkable path or sidewalk, I think would be an excellent way to use this money. And that's part of what I have in mind, so pass the mic to anybody else.
Joe,
Gary?
can I ask one question to that? The money, is the 484 in particular, does it have to be used in the way that they designed it, or it can be used like you're talking about? That's just, yeah, if you want to just.
The 484 at this point, and anything's open to a negotiation and change, Jim, you can correct me on this too, is it has to be used according to the FHA, Federal Highway Administration specifications. Okay, and don't ask me what they are right now.
Okay. Does Jim know? Can Jim answer?
Yeah, there are standards that are part of their
Jim, do you want to,
standards.
Jim?
Can you come up to the chair and then move the microphone?
Jim, sit down.
Yes, regarding the design, the design of the path, the Greenway, would have to satisfy what they call AASHTO standards. These are American State Highway Officials Transportation standards for greenways. There are minimum standards. It would have to be 8 foot wide. Because this is a two-way path, it would have to have a separating distance between the actual pavement on Route 1 and this walkway. And there are other standards that we work through in the design process for the plan that was submitted on November 1st. There are some latitude there is some latitude that is granted when, for physical reasons, you can't meet all the standards. And we've worked through that in a couple of places. Mark worked with VHB, which was the consultant that the state had for those areas where we were too close to Route 1. We had to install a fence, and I think that came up in November 1st, where we weren't 5 feet away from the existing pavement. Just as an indicator to motorists that there are pedestrians along the edge of the road, or bikers. But yes, we're kind of aware of that, and those standards we have complied with. We've gone through all the reviews at DOT, and we've satisfied them. But again, we were following and working with the Shoreline Greenway Trail. They were the initiators of the project. That doesn't mean that we couldn't take that original design, tweak it, listen to the comments of the public at the time, and bring it more in concert with the opinions that were expressed by the people without throwing it all away. I think, and I agree with Joe, I think as it was presented, I think we have enough public input to know that, it shouldn't go forward exactly as it is now. But I think there's an interim place before we just abandon the whole idea there. Because there is really, between the bridge, East River Bridge, and 146, there are limited options. And I think we've put a lot of work into those. We have to remember that part of the comprehensive plan of development is, and we've had this discussion, was to extend the sidewalks from the green all the way out to there. If we had come up with something that I think would be more acceptable to the public and to the Shoreline Greenway people, I think we would fulfill our comprehensive plan objectives, as well as come up with something that I think that would be more agreeable, including the discussions with the commercial property owners. We were kind of sidetracked. There was a letter submitted by Apple Rehab, the owner of that property. I know several occasions plans were submitted to them. The administrator there, as far as we were told, they had no objection to anything. And then this letter came in that night that they were by Mr. Foley, that where he was totally opposed to it and thought it was encroaching on his property. If we had, we would have adjusted the plan if that comment had come in earlier. Again, their administrator said nothing about that. So I think there are limited options from the bridge to 146. And obviously, there would have to be changes, but I think those could be done within the framework of what we have already prepared.
Let me back up. I was an original supporter of the Shoreline Greenway Trail, and when Stantec came out with this book, and I see Mark has it there, the $280,000 study. Mark, can you hold that up? Mike, get a copy of that. So I took the book and I drove to East Haven, where the trail was supposed to begin. And I followed that trail all the way from East Haven to Madison. It became very clear to me that it didn't work. I mean, Guilford and Madison in particular are north-south towns. Most of our passageways, other than those that have been forced by the Turnpike and Route 1 and Amtrak, basically go north-south. And that, it's pretty easy to get long distances north and south, but it was very clear that after $280,000 that was not going to work. Yeah, you don't have to stand there forever. Thank you. So I've been a general opponent to the idea because I knew that it would force its way through properties that weren't compatible with the concept that was presented. Bring it forward to this 7/10 of a mile. I walked that and I looked at it and I said to myself, do I want to be going up Route 1 from the bridge, pushing my grandson in a carriage and have a bike come whipping over the hill at 20 miles an hour? And I said, I don't think so. Greenways are very successful, and they're very successful in many places, but all of those that I'm aware of are dealing with a road bed, so that you have a fairly lengthy, flat, straight, visible area, probably substantially wider than the 10 feet, actually, if you're dealing with a road bed or a canal bed. And so they work, but I don't think it works in this place. I know there's a lot of people along Route 1 that have, over time, built up trees, bushes, whatever, to protect themselves from the sound of the traffic on Route 1, which this would impact substantially. And I think I've been very clear. I have problems with this particular idea as it exists. Would I be in favor of connecting the Guilford Green to this area? I think the people of Sunrise do want a pathway or a walkway. And as I've said to many people, neither of those are legal terms. There are two terms, small g greenway and sidewalk. But for the time being, let's talk about pathway. I think a pathway is justified. And if we can find a way to use some of this money to create a viable pathway, I think that's a good idea. I think if we can do something to work with Madison and create a pathway from the Guilford Green to the Madison Green, I think that's a viable idea and it works. I think the incompatibility of pedestrians and bicycles on a pathway such as this is problematic. Jim, I went back and I looked at the application you put in for a pathway from Adams School to the Guilford Golf Course, and I know some of that is contingent on reconstruction of roads that run along that, but you're talking about $656,000 to build essentially 2 miles of pathway. So I would hope that there is some way to utilize this money if in fact it remains available for our purposes, to create a viable pathway which is acceptable to the people that are along Route 1.
After reading all the letters and emails that we've received and walking the site along Route 1, I was particularly interested when they put tapes up to show how it would impact homeowners and businesses. I still feel strongly that at this moment, the best thing we could do is to build a sidewalk. And I think that's consistent with everything that we've done in the past. We've had a regular sidewalk construction program going for many years, and people all over town are using it. I've looked at the bikeway along Route 1 in that area, and it's probably the widest bike lane we have. I mean, when you compare it to 146, where in some cases there's maybe 8 inches, that's more than adequate. As far as having kids ride their bikes on Route 1, when we were kids, our parents wouldn't let us do it. And back then, the vehicles traveled a lot slower, and there were a lot less vehicles. I don't know why we would want kids riding along on their bicycles along Route 1 when there's plenty of places in town they can ride. But I do agree that, especially the people of Sunrise, they deserve to have a safe sidewalk connecting down to Alderbrook so that they could walk back and forth to town. Because when you see people going down in the morning for coffee even, and they have to walk along Route 1 out alongside the traffic, it's not a very good thing. So at the moment, given what we have, I'd be in favor of a sidewalk. But I also, I don't think we should spend any more money on a Greenway trail until we have a complete plan. I've also, we all have, looked at 146 and all the problems that 146 presents to us. And the state, we've talked to the state, we've tried to come up with plans, and even the raised bridge that they're proposing now has become a controversial issue. So I think we really are going to have to come up with a complete plan before we continue to put money into a Greenway trail. But I would like very much to see a sidewalk. And if it can go from the Madison line down to the 146, fine, but at least from Sunrise down to 146 at this time.
Anybody else want to comment, Joe?
My only comment would be, I think we could see, consensus that's building here, and my personal position is all about pedestrian access, and I have to agree with everybody that this particular plan, while it would give us pedestrian access, it just is the wrong plan at the wrong place at the wrong time. But I do think, whether we label it pathways or sidewalks or whatever, connecting the neighborhoods of Sunrise, Soundview, even the elite school area through some sidewalk trail, whatever word you want to use, makes a lot of sense. And if we were ever able to make that connection so that eventually it may connect with Madison and be green to green, that would be great too. The other interesting thing about even going further, if it's a sidewalk type thing that would work, and this is Mr. Portley's area of expertise, it would also, when building and construction is going on Route 1, one of the requirements I remember from planning and zoning is that people install sidewalks on Route 1. So we could end up with we've already got the green connected with River Street and that whole loop. We could end up with the green up Route 1 on sidewalks, privately constructed during new construction, down Soundview and back down Boston Street. That could be another whole loop if we, include these types of things in a plan. The 146 issue, I think we heard very clearly from the Leeds Island area and the whole west end of town, they just don't want anybody down there, and that's the way it is, and we understand that. And that's going to be very problematic to find a way, if ever. So to Carl's point, in an ideal world, it would probably be nice to have the whole thing connected. If anybody's used the trails in Hammonasset, they work over there, but that's a state park. Then Madison realized that they had to go through Liberty Street or make the choice to go down by the shore, and that's a separate type of connection. And that's why I think even doing a small piece like this proposal that we're discussing does work, because it can add to connections. The fears that have been raised about issues at the other end of town, well, those are very real. I mean, I'm not even going to say the words, about eminent domain and the rest of it that people have been running up the flagpoles. That no one's going that direction. Nobody's thinking it. Nobody wants to do it. We want to find an answer before we get to any of those kinds of discussions. So the other thing is the money. These times, I just wish we were in different economic times in the state and in our community. It's a lot of money, and if we can find a way that the town can put together something using some money that's already earmarked, I guess that's okay, but boy, I know I am going to be very careful supporting anything that's spending money after our last budget season and looking forward to what's going on in our state and our community at this time. So I think everybody knows where I stand.
No, I agree, Charles, with what you said. And just so I understand, that money from the federal grant, it can only be used, just to reiterate, for this type of project, correct? So we couldn't take the money and do something else with it, right?
It would have to be a greenway.
That's what I mean, okay.
Yes, it would
Yep.
have to be something that would satisfy the criteria of a greenway. We don't, if we could say, okay, we could take that money and build a sidewalk, that would be
Right.
great, but we can't.
And they're still requiring a 20% match?
Yes.
Okay.
And just for clarity's sake, because this did come up at the meeting in November, if you just build a sidewalk, then you throw on to the table that other issue of snow removal.
Right.
The green, and we've had input from town council that basically said, you build a sidewalk, then the sidewalk ordinance comes into play, and people who have frontage have the obligation to remove snow, have to treat ice. They have that full obligation like anybody downtown has. Under state legislation, greenways have been given a pass on that, because the thought is that greenways are not, don't fit under the sidewalk category, and therefore there is no state law or town ordinance that says that greenways require removal of snow.
Good, okay.
Jim, before I ask you to explain one more time for clarity the difference between a sidewalk and a greenway, excuse me, I just want to address the issue about money. I guess I've gotten a reputation of being a money guy, but I don't want to lead anyone astray about how much the town can do on its own for this project. We can't, right now, do anything. As of yesterday, I put a freeze on all capital projects that we have budgeted and we have not encumbered because of what the state did to us, cut us at the knees for $171,000. So I can't commit anything, and I wouldn't ask this board to commit anything going forward, at least until we get through these winter months. And in the coming budget, which Selectman Havertz just alluded to, we have no idea of what sort of state funding we're going to get at all. And if I haven't seen any numbers from the finance department yet, not that I would expect to at this point. It's going to be a very rough budget year, so we're very cognizant of what the taxpayers are going to put up with. So I can't expect to add any more money to sidewalks. So anything that we would add to a project would have to be from grant-funded funds. Okay. Jim, you want to explain the difference between a pathway and a sidewalk? I mean, a greenway and a sidewalk, all right?
The difference really is by definition. If, and I've talked to representatives of the state on this, because I thought there was a great deal of flexibility in the design of a greenway to kind of reflect that in certain areas you can have a wide path, other places it has to be narrowed. But what I understand now is that a greenway has to meet all those AASHTO standards. There are little variations they allow, but they have to meet the AASHTO standards, which is an 8-foot wide path. It has to be designated as a greenway and be accepted as a greenway by the state, as opposed to a sidewalk. It has to meet those kinds of designations. Everybody knows what a sidewalk is, but the greenway is a little bit less definitive because there are greenways that have been identified where they have incorporated sidewalks as part of it because they existed. And I think there's up in the town of Farmington and those areas up there where there are a lot more greenways that are here down along the shoreline. They have incorporated aspects of town sidewalks as part of their greenway, just as a practical thing, and nobody's worried about that. But when they build them, any constructed greenway must meet these AASHTO standards, and they're wider, and they have to have some approval from the state Greenway Committee. So that's basically the difference. In truth, the paths. I cavalierly would say when we talked about the State Street path some years ago, well, if we just designate it as a greenway, that we take the obligation off the back of the property owners for snow removal. Well, I was educated and chastened and told that, well, it's not that easy. You just don't go ahead and say, okay, now that's a greenway. So a little more understanding of what is required now, but that basically is the difference.
How many feet is the sidewalk?
Our minimum standard on new construction of sidewalks is 5 feet.
Okay.
So that when we were discussing what we talked about is that the path, the greenway, we presented a path that was 10 feet wide, but there were sections that were, because of basically topographic considerations and right-of-way issues, we narrowed them down to 8 feet. If you would ask me if we would come back and give something to the town again, I would make the whole thing 8 foot right through.
Yeah, so only
It's
theoretically
3
3 feet larger.
And I
Okay.
think, you look at the sidewalk in front of the Congregational Church, you look at the sidewalk down in front of the stores on Whitfield Street, 8 to 10 feet. It's a nice it's a nice path where you can have more two-way travel. Ideally around the green, you'd love to have an 8-foot sidewalk because it can be more of a community thing. You can have people stand and talk, and there is room to pass. When you have a 5-foot walk, yes, you can pass, but it's not a place where you can congregate. So, just as an aside.
Jim, isn't one of the other issues with a greenway, because it doesn't have to be cleared, it could, for instance, in a snowy winter, essentially be impassable for long periods of time, as either private landowners with driveways plow on either side, or the town and with its plows come through, and you could pile up 4 feet of snow, and therefore make it impassable.
Sure, and that is true that's true in many communities where they have those. They don't plow. I've talked to the folks up in Hamden and Cheshire. they do plow sections. I mean, I guess it really depends on how heavily used are and what the public demands are. But, I mean, it's a local decision, but if the decision was during winter months, from December 1st to April 1st, it was not gonna be plowed, that would be the decision, people just realized.
The other question I would ask Joe as we go through this process and look at whether any of this money can be repurposed is whether we use some of it to look at some of the trails money, to look at a town-wide trail and bikeway plan. I mean, the issue on this has come back to, where does it go from here? And we always have other questions about other pathways. I just think as a side issue, if we repurpose any of this money, we ought to look at whether or not it can be used for planning.
Yeah, I think that's, you and I had that discussion yesterday. It's worth the question, which is it's easy enough to ask DOT, and I can certainly get you that answer. I think we have a consensus, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm asking this to the board members, that it can certainly be an agenda item for our January 17th meeting, which is a regular meeting, to put on the agenda to take up and vote upon the issue of the current design, to vote yea or nay on it. Do I have that consensus to put that on the agenda? Okay.
Yes.
So folks, you will get that vote on January 17th, okay? So we'll put that on the agenda. Trace will put that on there, okay? And I will contact DOT probably as soon as I can get back, and I'll get you that answer, whether we could use it for design. And we had talked about that. I've had that conversation with a couple of individuals who are sitting in the audience, that if we can use this money to hire a consultant and put a whole new plan together, whether it be a pathway, sidewalk, or whatever, to put this money to good use. I hate to lose the money. I said this before, I'll say it again, because it will go away, and it's not going to go back into anyone's treasury. It will go to another town. And if it's going to go to another town, I'd rather it stay with Guilford. Okay, we just lost, I hate to say it again, we lost somebody a couple of days ago. I don't want to lose any more.
Joe, can we also put on the agenda to, if you have the answers with some of about doing a study with the money, can we at least talk about that as well?
Certainly. Yeah,
Okay.
put that on there. Jim?
If I may add one comment to that. Mark, yes, thank you. Mark presented what was the Stantec report. It was a $270,000 report that looked at the trailway from East Haven to Madison. What they found, and they were very diligent about trying to find options of where this path could go. They came up with the alignment of a Greenway path that was acceptable to the Council of Governments, to the representatives of the towns at the Council of Governments. During that process, they identified that this was going to be a difficult plan. It was going to present a Greenway, quotes, that connected the 2 points, but there were no easy avenues like the Farmington Canal that they could employ to construct this trail. And if you look through the sections in that report, the section we're talking about today, from the bridge to 146, they had just widening of the shoulders, basically. They didn't even have an off-road path. They thought that was just an impossibility. When we went into design, we found that there was additional right-of-way that we felt that we could build this sidewalk. My concern is with another study and another plan, when you get there and start putting it on the ground, it's much different than going through a study. You do the best you can, but when you get into the point where you're gonna build something, you have the turnout of all the folks who are gonna use it, and the property owners you're gonna go by. I'm not a big proponent of just studying for the sake of studying, because you really have to get hard design plans together that people can identify and see what they're buying. It was easy to go along with that plan. Oh, yeah, okay, that sounds okay. But it's not real until you start putting the design together and preparing the plans for construction. I know when we built River Street sidewalk, there was a lot of negotiation I did with the property owners. It wasn't to this extent. We were using our own money. And there was some give and take, and you always have that when you put something in front of somebody's property. One of the biggest concerns they had was snow removal. And it finally came together. So I'm not saying don't do a study, but there is it's not a panacea. It's not gonna resolve all your problems. You may get to say, okay, we all agree on that. We in this room agree to it. But when you come down to start building it, if it goes in front of Carl Balistrazi's house and he doesn't like it, and he gets all his family organized and comes out against it, you're gonna have a problem. So, these are the realities of the community we live in. I mean, I think the Shoreline Greenway Trail went along without anybody paying attention except their proponents for years, with what was going on. So the idea it came is, this was a surprise design. One of the things that, Joe, you and I have been discussing the finances going back, this thing has taken too long. It's been years in the process. So that's fine, and that's what way projects have to go. But the idea of more studying, until you get real hard design, you're not going to really have something until you get that done. My last comment. Yeah.
Yeah, to Cindy's point, I think developing alternatives could be considered a plan. I mean, that's what I'm hoping for, is that we build and take in the public's comments. I think you already stated that, and basically it comes down to scaling back and find some alternatives that work within, the structure of this area that we're talking about.
If you really want to utilize the money,
No.
get a sidewalk, because that's what I'm talking about. Scaling it to what I would consider a sidewalk, an 8-foot wide walkway between those points. It's never going to be what Gary looked to have, like a Greenway trail where you would have it wide and people can zoom by on bikes. It's never going to be there.
The trail concept just doesn't fit looks-wise, or
No.
it doesn't fit. But, I as far as a plan, I'm not suggesting that we go contract and seek bids and that type of thing. I was hoping that your department could develop some alternatives based on, the existing plan. Wrong word, but.
Well, I think that's a place to start, yeah.
One alternative is that a Greenway trail isn't going to work in Guilford. And that's something we all have to consider also. I mean,
And
We've
as far as the words Greenway Trail, I have no problem stating that it's not going to work, but I go back to my statement about pedestrian access. I think connecting neighborhoods to scenic areas, town-owned scenic areas, I just think is valuable. We have a big investment in open space and scenic areas in this community, and pedestrian access, I think, is valuable.
Okay, to that point, I think I said the other day, Gary, you're the one who knows best that probably 1/3 of the town is open space. And if we can connect, like you said, connect those areas through pedestrian walkways would be a great deal for our citizens. Okay, do we have any more comment from the board? No. Okay. Anything else? All right, according to my notes, we're going to put this item on the agenda take action on it on January 17th, which will be an up and down vote, up or down vote, and we'll get some clarification from DOT whether the funds that are still granted to the town can be used for design for a new plan or different alternatives. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
You should note the time, the change in time for the 17th.
Yeah, we're attempting to change the time of the January 17th regular Board of Selectmen meeting from 8:30 in the morning till 2:30 in the afternoon for anyone who wants to attend, okay? And we will have public forum, as we usually do on any regular meeting, okay? That'll be 2:30 on January 17th, and this item will be on the agenda for a vote. If there's no further business, I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Appreciate your attendance.